9:15 at night on the 24th of June 2020, and it is still swelteringly hot. It has been a punishingly hot summer's day. Every year a day comes along, or a warm snap that reminds you you ain't seen nothing yet with regards to the warm days that have preceded it. But yeah, I've been in the privileged position to be able to just lock myself away in a darkened room. I love the summer. I love being able to just roll out of bed into the garden, you know, metaphorically speaking. I would actually like to roll everywhere. Getting up in the morning when you're nearly 50, my body aches pleasantly from head to foot in bed. And I can remember seeing older people when I was younger and just thinking, oh God, stop making such a song and dance of it. When I wake up, my whole body is so beautifully and perfectly fatigued. You know, I guess that, like I always say, we don't know, or our bodies don't know if it's 1432 or 2020 that we were born in, you know. And at 50, you're well past your use by date, aren't you, if you go back a few hundred years? I don't know if evolution takes all of this into consideration, the leaps in sort of sanitisation and medical know-how and everything that keeps us alive so much longer, you know, just better living standards. But I know I can certainly feel my age in my body, and at this point I'm not complaining about it. I love waking up when I haven't got to get up and just feeling the fatigue from head to foot. It's a pleasant feeling. It's one of the aspects of having a manual job that I've always enjoyed. You know, any point in my life where you've just felt absolutely physically and mentally knackered at the end of the day and not having to get up on a Saturday. It's a lovely feeling. Really is a truly beautiful evening to be out and about. You only get a few of these in the UK a year, where the weather is genuinely still warm at night. It's lovely. It's something so welcoming about the world at this time of the year. And you know, it's not long before the evenings draw in and the weather gets colder, or cooler at least, in the short term, and that sort of brief welcome into the sort of ecosystem. You know, I like the way that the ecosystem says, you know, come along, you're welcome. This is the time of year for you. But there's a vast proportion of the year with the UK that just says, go home, stock up, build a fire, keep warm, tell tales, share stories, sing songs, you know. And that's a really kind of primal thing, I guess. But I do enjoy this time where the world and all of its beauty sort of unanimously just says, come on, come out and have a look. This is what all the year's toil is about. This is the beauty that I can offer you. I know there's a LOU. There's an Australian YouTuber once who just said, God, the UK looks like a dull place. And it was the middle of winter, and it is a grey and barren place to be in the winter. But when summer comes, boy, is the juxtaposition pronounced. It's a country that I love living in, if I'm honest. If I had no ties, I'd like to disappear off to a country that's warm all year round. I do not like winter, but I certainly am very aware of the fact that I might get very tired and bored with sort of relentless summertime. But yeah, it's something which I deal with less and less well as I get older, the winter. But I think that is a lot to do with where my sort of emotional landscape has been for the last half a decade or so, you know. And who knows, that might change. I can remember times in my life where I'd found happiness and joy, and the winter was a wondrous time. You know, that feeling of being able to light the fire, lock the doors, and even the processes of things. You know, I was living in the countryside. You know, the processes of stocking up on things like logs, getting them off the back of a truck, piling them up outside the house, you know. Wonderful. Don't have bad memories of those winters, but you know, it's all about our own individual ecosystem. There's the ecosystem that directly surrounds us now, and I'm completely swamped with the smell of weed again. And there's our own personal ecosystem. We're as much of a sort of Gaia-like physiological entity as the planet is, or the planet is to us, you know. And we're going to have our, you know, if you understand the seasons, you understand humanity, don't you? Our winter, our spring, our summer and our autumn, you know. I think there's a lot about my psychology that appears at times like that, where the first season that I mention is winter. You know, I don't know. I don't like people who read too much into things that I say at times. I'm a pretty direct person, but I am noticing that I've taken on certain traits that I needn't have done, you know. A few old traits have started appearing. Maybe that's just part of getting older. Saw a group of younger people the other day who hadn't seen each other for months. They were in my garden, and I'd been watering the garden, and all of a sudden that sort of almost put a real sort of sense of how old I am onto me. And I came out with some comment like, "Oh, I've left the hose on for a few hours. It's flooded here." And I thought, oh, these people are sort of in their mid to late 20s. They're just going to be thinking, "Okay, Grandad, I don't care." But it just is funny, you know. When did I suddenly get so old? You know, I mean that. There's I think I was living such a sort of fantasy as to who I thought I was up until about 10 years ago. And the last 10 years have been so dominated with bringing up my daughter that you don't take stock of who you are. And in that time, maybe just as a completely natural process, you know, I've become quite the old man. I'm not unhappy with it. It just is something that I noticed the other day, where I definitely wasn't made to feel that way, but I felt 50, because the people around me felt 30, you know, definitely felt my age. Not a bad thing, just something worth commenting on, really. It only seems like 5 minutes since I was filming the beautiful blossom on these apple trees. And there you have it. Sums it up really, doesn't it? From those apple trees blossoming back in April, May time, to now in late June. But before you know it in life, you take your eye off the ball for seemingly 5 minutes as a figure of speech. All of a sudden, dates and future events that you do categorise when you're younger, all of a sudden you think, Jesus Christ, I am 30. And it doesn't, all of a sudden it doesn't seem like end of the world kind of as old as you're gonna get nightmare, you know. It just doesn't seem that way. And suddenly, without warning, you're 40. Then in the blink of an eye, pregnancy happens in your life, your child is born, and then it's her 9th birthday, and you're looking at your 50th birthday. We physically age on the exterior so rapidly. And I'll admit, sometimes I hate the mirror, and I've taken my eye metaphorically off the ball with even sort of observing my mirror image as much as humanly possible. And you know, I'll see a picture of myself, or look at one of these videos and actually really look at it and think, look how old you've become, you know, to quote Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens. And it's, you know, it's weird when played off against how you just don't feel any different. You just feel like a sort of more world-weary version of who you were at sort of 20, 30. You know, when I look back at a magical winter in my life, 1996, I've talked about it a lot. You know, you talk about that, it's 24 years ago, it's a long time. And you know, there are people sometimes when I've been doing things like playing Call of Duty, and in their screen name I'll notice they're called so-and-so, so-and-so, '96, and I thought, oh, little spring chicken. I think, you're 24. You know, I remember being 24 and going to Glastonbury. I saw Johnny Cash at the festival that year. All sorts of things, you know, had happened already under the bridge massively by the time I was 24. And it strikes me, God, you know, this life, snap of the fingers, blink of the eye, and you're getting towards the 3/4 mark, you know. It's stunning, and I think that what I try to get across, it's almost like the decision I felt I'd made to submit to the age I was. And I see a garden full of younger people, and oh, the gardener's here, you know, give me Kendal mint cake and a cup of tea and I'm happy. Couldn't be further from the truth of what and who I truly am. It is almost like our sort of physiological makeup does start to bend into the age we are, but nature or nurture, it's just so interesting, because there's so much that I've almost sort of in an embittered way decided upon. I'm not bothering with that anymore, and it doesn't take much. You know, it's like sometimes my daughter, I say, should we go to the park? No, Daddy, I want to stay at home and just, you know, it's just so attractive these days. PlayStation, iPad, you know, she loves it all. You know, I get her down here and she's grumping away and dragging her feet, and she's 20 paces behind me, and when she gets here we have the time of our lives. And I'm very much like that still to this day. Like tonight, I just thought, I can't be bothered, I don't want to get out, and I did. So glad I did. So much racing around my mind, and so much I'm enjoying about being out in the, well, it's still actually really hot. I was going to say the cool evening air, it's still really hot, you know. A lot of what we become with regards to submitting to age is what we've decided we are. I ain't that little old man who's happy gardening. It's part of my life that I enjoy without shame now. But I'm also not going to be the oldest swinger in town. I'm very aware of the limitations. And I'm very certain of my likes and dislikes. That is something which I'm so glad is a part of my past. Most of you people who watch this are of a certain, you know, you're of a certain age. And isn't it wonderful knowing that anybody sort of making that invite in your life, you aren't going to sort of begrudgingly go, all right then, have a miserable day, and sort of pretend for the rest of the year whenever that group of people get together that you had a really good time. It's just so nice being certain of what you like and what you don't like, but it's not falling into the trap of just dismissing everything because you've decided, no, Mr. Kendal mint cake and a cup of tea now. You know, I've got to stop being like that. Another aroma which is quite overpowering at the moment in this park is just all the plants that are in bloom at the moment. It's intoxicating, it's beautiful. This is a day that I'm grateful for, you know. Every so often the darker days do just wash to one side, albeit temporarily. You know, I know how fickle my mind is at allowing me to enjoy anything, but there's a lot of sensory and psychological kind of overload going on in a really nice way. You know, sometimes the overload can weigh you down and you're convinced you almost look like your face is sagging, your heels are dragging, but you know, the truth is sometimes you feel sort of quite a sensory overload in a way that puts a spring in your step. I'd never go as far as saying there's ever a spring in my step. I truly am these days as melancholy as I come across. But that comes of being on your own. You know, we're not designed to be on our own. I'm happy with it at this point in time, but it has to be taken into consideration. That's coming from somebody who's unwell. But what does being well psychologically actually mean these days? To be well adjusted to the society as it was, and probably still continues to be, because this is such a weird time in all of our histories. To be well adjusted to that could hardly be seen as a symptom of good mental health. I don't know, I probably still will insist till the end of all this journey for me that being damaged and broken is the default state, just like fight or flight in the animal kingdom that I've talked about before. We're no different. And animals, you know, we've just developed self-awareness, and we have concepts of pleasure and love and everything like that. But then again, I was watching videos today of service animals being reunited with their owners after, you know, like it was a bomb dog that him and his master got blown up in Afghanistan, and they were reunited after 5 years. So the dog could retire with him. It's lovely seeing it. You know, the dog was so happy to see him, recognised him after 5 years, and the dog was showing emotion. You can argue till the cows come home that animals don't feel emotion, but that dog was showing and feeling quite uncontrollable emotion in its face, in its reaction. You know, animals feel love. Some do, some don't, I guess. Some humans don't feel love, you know. But yeah, I don't know, just waffling on so much, aren't I? But fuck that. I love those little things that come along like that, where a tree just says, I'm still here, you know. There's still things that are going to come along and go to your day. What I like in coming out of my image and ego obsessed days, you don't know you're ego obsessed. That's how powerful the ego is. You know, it's probably guiding me now to think that I'm sort of aware of my ego. But it is funny when all of a sudden you do start waking up, as far as you're concerned, from having had a big ego. And it's like waking up from hypnosis. You know, it's like the guy on the stage claps his hands and you're standing there bent double pretending to be a chicken, and you're aware of the fact just for a split second. Why am I going and sort of crawling around pecking the floor with my nose? What am I doing? And someone who I think that sums this up, who you're all aware of, is Russell Brand. And 10-15 years ago, when he was really finding his feet with regards to getting popular, he played this dandy camp version of himself with long hair that was back combed absurdly. No, fair play to him, he did it well. And he was just so over the top camp, and I hate this word, you know, used, outrageous comedy. I hate it when people use that phrase, but I'm just borrowing one from other people to sort of paraphrase it. And then he sort of slowly but surely got into the Hollywood thing and became a bit more slick, and obviously knew he needed to change his sort of visage slightly. And he looked a lot more sort of clean. Gone was the backcombing, gone was the makeup, and he just looked, you know, like a sort of clean version of himself. A slightly more sort of Giorgio Armani version of the quite gay-looking dandy that he was in the middle part of the decade before last. Now he's rejected celebrity, even though he does a podcast where he interviews famous people of interest. The people of interest that I've found have never been famous, so I've never been privy to meeting them. The truly interesting people that I've come across haven't been sort of rubber stamped and approved by the cult of celebrity. They're people like, doesn't matter who this is, Wayne Castle, one of the most astoundingly intelligent human beings I've ever met. Very nice to work with him, very nice to be around, and quite stunningly spiritually and socially perceptive. But yeah, now somebody's clapped their hands for a third time in, as I say, in Russell Brand's life, and he's now ditched celebrity, even though his whole life is completely surrounded by celebrity. You know, I don't get it when people say the one thing but act another. It's like, I've given up mainstream celebrity. I'm still sort of completely reliant on the heroine of public adoration. And I'm not saying he's doing anything bad. I find the guy very interesting to listen to, but it's almost like somebody's clapped their hands from the Hollywood Russell Brand, and he's decided now that he's the spiritual yogi, you know? He's the deep and meaningful Baba Ram Dass of the 21st century. God, I argue with his followers so much. I'll tell you why before I finish this, if I remember. But yeah, and of course Russell Brand hasn't just decided I've ditched celebrity, which he hasn't. He's just gone to another field of it. You know, just get your head out of your arse and start looking at what you're actually saying, people. It's not just him, I like him. And you know, it's a situation now where he hasn't just sort of decided, well, I'm spiritual, I'm deep, I have got a gift for communicating with people, I'm gonna ditch celebrity, ditch wealth, which I doubt he's done, and sort of become that kind of person, because now he is just the archetype of having the robes, the beard, the long hair. He's just become the archetypal kind of cliche of the spiritual yogi, you know, all driven by ego. Psychedelic pioneer, spiritual guru of the 1960s and 70s, Richard Alpert, went to see some spiritual guru, other such nonsense, and he was bestowed a name that overrode his birth name. He was no longer Richard Alpert. People know him now, he's in his 80s or 90s now, as Baba Ram Dass. It means servant of God or something like that. And I just say to people, these people, they ramble on and on and on about ego, possession, and then give themselves names that just mean something. Why not call him servant of God? Why has it got to be Baba Ram Dass? Can I understand, maybe, yeah, you want to change your name, nothing wrong with that. But it's like whenever people do this thing like light language, they always do it with they have imprinted that is an exotic sounding language, and they always do it sounding like that. You go and watch them. It's never somebody going, it's sort of with a Cockney accent. It's always somebody sounding very Arabian. And people have just imprinted. It's like there's a real spiritual dickhead. I know a few of you know that I've got real beef with this guy. He runs an organisation called Team Light, and he was called Ryan for God knows how many years, but now he's got really deep into his spiritual nonsense, and he's quite well known. He's no longer Ryan, he's Rione. To quote some spiritual bloke or other, I can't remember his name, from 40 or 50 years ago, he said that life is a musical event and we should sing and dance while the music's being played. There's nothing wrong with dressing up, there's nothing wrong with how you want to express yourself, there's nothing wrong with wearing clothes that suit you, having your nose pierced, dyeing your hair pink, do what you want. But we've got to accept that somebody who decides, right, now I'm the Hollywood slick guy, I wear Armani suits and the like, or now I've given up celebrity and I'm Mr. Hippie, that I have imprinted about how those people look, that it's very monk-like. You know, Russell Brand has regularly got a cowl on, and you know, he covers his head because he's imprinted throughout his whole life that's what monks look like, that's what spiritual sages look like. You know, there's nothing wrong with it, I've got no problem with it whatsoever. But the fishiness, you know, Billy Connolly said, wearing a suit, he doesn't trust anyone in a suit. He says they're liars' clothes, people only wear them when they're trying to convince you of something that they need to fast track. You know, people wear a suit when they go to courts, they're trying to fast track respectability. And there's so much of, especially with the spiritual movement, where people claim to be deep, but they're using very manipulative tools that kind of go a little bit further than people just dressing in a way that suits them. They're wearing very manipulative tools to try and fast track an opinion in you of them. And in Russell Brand, I suspect that, you know. I think the world is a vastly better place with him in it, in a position of celebrity. But I'm not fooled for a second that he isn't one day going to wake up and just think, right, the hypnosis is just more or less over 100% now. You know, I know that I was hypnotised. I know that I was told to bark like a dog, squawk like a chicken, look like the Hollywood guy, look like the gay dandy, look like the spiritual sage. You know, he's going to realise it. And maybe in later life he'll just be a very average looking guy who, I think there's sincerity in what he says. But I don't trust anybody who tries to fast track an opinion within their audience of them by adopting every cliche of what we imprinted. You know, we imprint on a very negative level, and very spiritual people draw attention to that. They'll say, you know, we imprint as mammals about, you know, what's good, what's bad, and there are people in the media exploiting that, and they wear the tools of respectability in suits and ties and everything like that, and we know it's all a farce. But on the other side of the fence, people have imprinted just as much. Yeah, it's like I used to say when I was a sort of hippie, punk rock, hunt saboteur, vegan. When I got out of that, even though I went on further and just got further into ego, you know, I did realise very early on, sort of when I was sort of stepping away from it, and I can remember saying to somebody, I've worked out with these people that we hang around with, they have a manifesto tucked in the pocket of every pair of combat trousers or combat boots that they buy, that says, I'll be vegan, I'll like the Levellers, I'll go to Glastonbury, I'll criticise it and only hang out in the Greenfield, but I'll go to Glastonbury, go to free festivals, go to raves. You know, there's so much bought and sold in individuality, and there is so much bought and sold heart and soul in the world. You can tell if somebody's sincere. I strongly believe that. But then again, look at the amount of people who fall for ego, hook, line and sinker, rod and copy of Angling Times.